Good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate the invitation from the Planning Committee to present ASCO's policy perspective on this important topic. This is an area that has been of personal interest to me for many years since I first appointed the Cancer in the Elderly Committee of the CALGB Cooperative Group back in 1996. And of course, now that I actually am an older adult, it's even more important to me. My disclosure is that I'm still an employee of ASCO for a few more weeks, and ASCO receives grants from the pharmaceutical company shown here in support of the TAPER study, for which I am the principal investigator. Now, this has been an area of interest to ASCO for the better part of the last decade, and we issued a major report back in 2015, led by the late Arthur Huria, about this very topic, improving the evidence base for treating older adults with cancer. You've already heard something about this in the first session of the meeting from Laura Levitt, my colleague at ASCO, so I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on the contents of this article, except to call out some of the policy recommendations as I proceed through this presentation. You also heard from Laura and Heidi Kleppen and Harpreet Singh about the FDA ASCO workshop on this topic that was held in 2017 and reported in this JNCI paper in 2018. And I'll also point out that in 2018, ASCO issued a clinical practice guideline, in a sense, on the management and assessment of older patients receiving chemotherapy, with a focus on use of the geriatric assessment as a key mechanism to assess the fitness and tolerance of older individuals to receive cancer treatment. And it would seem that if there is now a recommendation to do this in routine clinical practice, it is completely reasonable to also begin to incorporate elements of the geriatric assessment in cancer clinical trials. Last December, ASCO issued its Road to Recovery report, summarizing some of the learnings from the COVID-19 experience with a goal toward improving clinical research on cancer care. Hopefully many of you have seen that. This report had two sets of recommendations, one regarding clinical research, one regarding care delivery. And on the research side, one of the 5 goals that was articulated, highlighted here, is to design more pragmatic and efficient clinical trials that are better integrated into routine clinical care. And of course, if we're able to do that successfully, we should be developing clinical trials that are much more accessible to older patients, simply because they are integrated into routine clinical care and don't require any special assessments. And hopefully, all of you are aware of ASCO's work that's been ongoing with Friends of Cancer Research and FDA since 2017 now, seeking to broaden eligibility criteria to make clinical trials more representative and accessible. This first round of recommendations was published in the JCO in October of 2017. There is a new round of recommendations I'm happy to say will be published very shortly in Clinical Cancer Research. And together, the goal here is to simplify clinical trials, make them more accessible, make them more representative. And of course, as these recommendations now move into implementation, stimulated, we hope, by recent FDA guidance on this, that we will begin to see more older patients enrolling in clinical trials. So our policy recommendations can be summarized in a few specific areas. With respect to researchers and funders, we recommend that there be targeted funding opportunities to support research involving older adults, and that experts in geriatrics and geriatric oncology be included on review panels. Second, we recommend that researchers be required to include a plan to study a population that mirrors the age distribution and health profile of patients with the disease, and that the results be reported accordingly. And I think we'll have some further discussion in this session about the importance of reporting the results as they adequately describe the characteristics of the population included in the study. We recommend that there be development of a common set of data elements to be collected in all trials, including elements from the geriatric assessment, which, as I said, is now recommended as a core component of the clinical evaluation of older individuals to help identify which older patients are most likely to benefit or not from specific treatments. And then, as I mentioned, the overarching goal is to design more pragmatic, efficient, and decentralized clinical trials, which can then be accessible to older patients who may not be able to travel to a research site. Regulatory agencies have an important role to play here as well. We recommend that registration-directed trials be required to contain a plan to gather data and develop recommendations on the safety, efficacy, and dosing in older adults. And this data can be acquired in the pre or post-market setting, but importantly, we feel that once the adequate data is acquired, the drug label should be adjusted accordingly so that sponsors of those drugs can actually talk about in a knowledgeable way the utility of the drug in older populations. We think regulatory agencies should create incentives for conducting clinical trials in older patients, such as additional months of market exclusivity or transferable vouchers for expedited review of marketing applications. I know we'll hear more about this from Aaron Kesselheim in the next presentation. And then, of course, we think it's important to include experts in aging and geriatric oncology on the advisory boards of regulatory authorities. With respect to payers, payers have an opportunity to stimulate knowledge acquisition about the optimal way to treat older adults by using the so-called coverage with evidence development strategy to cover the off-label use of marketed drugs in cancer clinical trials in older individuals, while simultaneously gathering data about the safety and effectiveness of those treatments. And then physicians. Physicians play a major role in enrolling older patients in clinical trials. Frankly, if the doctor doesn't recommend it or offer it, it's not going to happen. But physicians also need some incentive to do so. We've recommended that the AMA should establish new CPT codes to reimburse clinicians for the additional time and effort required to enroll, manage, and follow up older patients on clinical trials. And of course, that these CPT codes should be reimbursed by Medicare, Medicaid, and third-party payers. So in summary, in essence, ASCO believes that coordinated efforts among researchers, funders, regulators, and payers can improve the evidence base for treating older adults, and policy initiatives at several levels are necessary to provide the incentives to do so. Thank you, and I look forward to the upcoming discussion.